If we were doing everything right and we were doing a great job, this wouldn't be happening. I don't think the people from the club that were on that call would have any issue with me sharing that, mate. No, yeah, I did. I had a golden opportunity to look to take that and come out with something polished. Lights up, social media lights up. You would have seen posts from the club.
Yet having sat around, having listened to those opinions, they then discard them and go and do something different. Hello and welcome to a slightly different video today. There's somebody on the other side of the screen. Where is he? There or there? I never know how these things end up. He's either there or there at the moment. But as I'm looking at him, he's straight ahead of me. You recognise him from last time. It's Tross. He's from Hammers United. And we're going to have a little talk about, basically, about all things West Ham in terms of how we think they've done since lockdown up to now. Now, first of all, I just want to go back to where we were just before everything happened. Tross, well, welcome first of all, mate. I'd like to go back, if we can, to the protests. How did that come about? And just maybe actually let's just start off for those of you that don't remember the first video. Just tell us a little bit about Hammers United, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, certainly, Gonzo. And thanks very much for having us on again, mate. Real pleasure as always. I suppose the crux for those who don't know. Hammers United was formed after some historic challenges, shall we say, in and around supporter engagement at the club. Seemed to be a bit of a, won't go into those details, but a number of challenges for fans to get any kind of engagement and to get the right kind of messaging across for the club to pay attention. We had a number of challenges, I think, previously as a fan base, looking to get our fans together and engaged. That never kind of happened. Hammers United was formed. Paul Colburn, Bubbles, is our chairman. As those who don't know, Paul was the guy who symbolically picked up the flag and placed it in the centre circle against Burnley. And from there, really, Hammers United was born. Not much later. As a group, what we've strived for is constructive and meaningful dialogue with the club to look to try and improve fan experience across the board for all West Ham United fans. And from when we started, as a few guys meeting in the back of a pub and then in a community centre, now we're very proud to boast over 13,500 members, and we're the largest independent West Ham United supporters group, fully affiliated with the Football Supporters Association. So it's been a really, really good journey. Since we last spoke, we had a first demonstration, which was opposite the stadium on the Olympic Park, where we had about 2,500 people attend during the course of the day, and we made a big point. Unfortunately, we still couldn't get the kind of dialogue that we were hoping to achieve with the club, still very much on the peripheries. As such, another demonstration was called, whereby we organised a stroll along the Greenway, which went off incredibly well. We went right up to the edge of the stadium, and we had 8,500 people turn up on the day. Which is quite a sizable number. I can't think of another example in certainly in the English game where we've had that many fans of a club turn out, born out of pure frustration, really, with the ownership of the club. A very, very successful day. A few speeches at the back end. Everybody voicing their disapproval of the current state that West Ham finds itself in after a certain period of time under the ownership of Messrs Gold, Sullivan and Lady Brady.
Yeah, cheers, mate. I was there that day, and I went along the stroll along, and I thought it was amazing how many people turned up. I got on record and done videos of what I thought was an inaccurate representation of who had turned up at the first protest. You say it was, 2,500. I'd certainly agree with that. But we were seeing reports coming out of in the low hundreds, which was clearly
very, very interesting.
Which was clearly a manipulated number. Or it led you to. It was so inaccurate. It led you to believe that there had been some doctoring of the numbers, and it was right next to the Hammers Chat boats. It was very, very visible to us, and I know what a couple of hundred people look like because we get 200-300 on the boats. So I see 200-300 people every week. So I knew it was considerably more than that. But when you see the numbers getting changed, well, for me personally, I'm not putting words in your mouth. You automatically think, well, who's doing this? Why is there an agenda? Particularly as some articles initially reported, oh, there's 1,500 people opposite the stadium. Then it would change. You'd say, oh, no, I got that wrong. There's a few hundred people opposite the stadium. Well, it is such a minute detail. You wouldn't change it anyway. It's quite a strange thing to do conversationally. You just leave it and say, yeah, it was that number of people over there. So the fact they went on to change it, I found it suspicious anyway. But we fast forward to the next one, and I really need to make this point, and I'm gonna make the point for you that I thought that the original marches where Paul placed a flag in the ground, the way that didn't happen, I thought was so disruptive and so bad for the club, and I thought it at that point it probably permanently harmed any chances of there ever being any more successful protest, because it basically completely failed, and obviously the stadium, what happened in the stadium is well recorded now. So I think you've done remarkably well to get it to the stage that you did. And I also think the fact that you've obviously insisted on it being peaceful, and I'm going to tell you a little story which you don't know. Obviously we have spoken on the phone numerous times, but you don't know this story, and it was about that last stroll. What game was it again? The last one? What was it? It was almost the last game before lockdown, wasn't it?
Do you know, it's a good question, mate. I can't actually remember. How bad's that? That's clearly too many G&Ts on my front.
Absolutely. Well, you say too many G&Ts, but I thought it was a really, really sober march, actually. And I thought it was really, really well done, and everything was well organised. And you would place stewards in there. You'd got the permission of Newham, the Metropolitan Police. You'd basically ticked all the boxes. And when we were there, somebody set off a firework, and I don't know who it was, but it was someone affiliated with you, because they had not set off the firework, but someone affiliated you because they had the bib on, and they went straight over and they said, oi, we don't want that. This is nothing to do with us. It's nothing to do with Hammers United. We don't want that sort of disruption. It's got to be peaceful. Basically, if you can't join in and you can't do it in a proper way, then jog on, basically. Yeah. And I thought that really sort of encapsulated what you were trying to do. And then, because this is the bit I really want to get onto, and then we fast forwards on to the point where that was tremendously successful. And I think under any other circumstances, that would have been the catalyst for change. If not, I feel you might have even got 10,000 at the next one. But then we had lockdown, and it stopped it in its tracks. And I'm going to paraphrase you here. As an entity, you very much turned around and said, look, there's a bigger problem in the world now. People are losing their jobs. There's a concern about safety. It is not right to go and protest. It's not right to go outside the ground. We're going to take a step back now. And I felt at that point it had almost done the club a bit of a favour. And I understand jobs and so on and so forth, but I just mean in terms of giving them some breathing space to evaluate what had happened, which had been 8,000 fans displaying how unhappy they were outside the ground. And I thought that was a breathing space for the time, and the time for the club to take their thoughts, to reflect on it, and then come forward and do something and approach you. I thought it was an ideal opportunity. Can you then take us through what then happened after that point?
Yeah, sure, mate. So I suppose you make some very good points there, and I think again I completely concur in regards to the protest, and where we were and what we achieved on the day, bringing out 8,500 fans, and West Ham has always been Hammers United is a very open church, and West Ham's fan base is very, very broad and very, very diverse, and it's very important to be able to make sure that you capture all of that. It was great. It was great for me. I called up in the morning with some of West Ham's finest, and got some really, really, really nice comments about how we'd organised and what we'd done. At the same time, I remember being under the bridges as everybody came in past Pudding Mill Lane, and seeing a lovely young blonde lad who was about 3 or 4 on his dad's shoulders, bouncing along, clapping and singing with everybody else. And I think it's being able to bridge that gap, Gons, that's really, really managed to get us, that platform where people can see, do you know what, we're a serious group of people. We're all kind of committed. We want to make sure we do things the right way. And it's very important, obviously, that we make sure that nobody's in a position, particularly with your referral earlier, to controlling the narratives media-wise, to try and highlight towards any of the negative, and a big focus on the positive of what we're looking to achieve. So I suppose if we come right up to date, and in and around our decision as a committee, obviously, the global pandemic, I think it's impacted everybody. It's certainly hit some of us. We've had committee members who have had COVID-19 and survived that successfully, thankfully. We've also lost a committee member in Dennis Lepine, as you may well know. You know, Dennis passed very sadly, not COVID related, but massive blow to all of West Ham support, you know, who know Dennis and what he's done at the Hornchurch coaches over a number of years. But even before that, really, I think we made a conscious decision that when the brakes were put on and some of the government guidance was given around COVID and what to do, that, you know, I think as a group, you know, firstly and foremost, we've got a social responsibility to our members and to all fans, and nobody wants to be in a position where we're looking to endanger or cause any issues from a health perspective. And not enough really was understood. People just didn't know enough at the time. So we decided to down tools and step back at that point. And, you know, as just like everything else, you know, with the nation getting back to work, with everybody making a recovery as we come through this current climate, Hammers United again started up the wheels, you know, started firing up the engines, and the wheels started turning, and we've looked to start re-engaging. We've done a lot of work over the close period. The committee, I'm blessed to work with some fantastic people on the committee at Hammers United, and we've got an amazing think tank of all volunteers, of people who freely give up their time, you know, in an effort to look to improve things for West Ham fans everywhere, you know. And I suppose we're now in that position where, you know, we're talking about taking football back into stadiums, football fans back into stadiums, and, you know, the invariable thing about what that's going to look like, season tickets for next year, what the commercial model around it's going to look like, how fan experience where it currently is post that kind of high point. And yeah, I agree with you, actually, mate. You know, I suppose from a, you know, and I wouldn't want to put words in the mouth of the board, obviously. But, you know, I suppose if I was in the unfortunate position that they are in, with that level of dissatisfaction across the board with their fan base, I'd have probably been grateful for the break. And honestly, I'd have taken that time, you know, to probably circle the wagons a bit and think, well, look, you know, if we were doing everything right and we were doing a great job, this wouldn't be happening, would it? You know, and despite everything else, you know, just the basics, right? The absolute basics. If we're running a business and we've got a sizable chunk of our supporter base, our fan base, commonly referred to as customers, which is always quite a few of us gons, you know. But yeah, you know, if the experience for that many of our fans is that bad, causing that many people to go out and, you know, to go out and demonstrate on the street, you know, then something's not right. And you'd like to have thought that over that period of time, the wagons were circled and people would have looked to have tried to do things differently. And that's you know, unfortunately, that's been a real challenge. And, you know, we've kind of, for a period of time, found ourselves as a supporters group, you know, desperately trying to achieve dialogue, trying to change things and push things forward. That hasn't come, you know, it hasn't come quick enough. As such, we are accountable to our members, and our members have placed us as a group, you know, in protest against the current regime at the club. So we are a supporters group, an independent supporters group, in protest against the current owners of our club where we are. And there's been lots going on, actually, in regards to trying to kind of get that platform where there is engagement. And I have to say that the efforts to look to build and create a new supporters board were kicked off by the club. As you'll know, there have been incarnations of I think it was the SAB and then the OSB, which was then called to a halt earlier in the season after it was supposed to be a meeting down at Rush Green that was cancelled last minute, and, you know, another outstanding public relations exercise by our learned friends at the club. And then we kind of find ourselves in a position where the club look to be trying to control the narrative again and go it alone and rebuild a supporters board.
Can I just stop you there, Tross? Let me just stop you, as I just want to make it clear. So we had the official supporters board, which was, as I understand it, was put in place by the club. A lot of people's issue with that was that it wasn't democratically elected, that the board were selecting, basically, that West Ham Football Club was selecting people to go on to a supporters association, in essence, which should be really ratified and voted in by the fans themselves. It can't be independent if the board are deciding who goes in. Basically, if you are going cap in hand to the club, you have to be grateful to the club for your own seat on that committee. Then that's really an unhealthy situation. So as I understand it, that was disbanded. The OSB was disbanded. Have I got that right?
So I suppose that this banding, I do love, I do love the grey areas that sometimes our club like seems to take these actions and leave these grey areas for us to move into. They were kind of disbanded or put on hold until the end of the season. There was supposed to be a meeting down at Rush Green. That was cancelled. They said there'll be no more meetings. We're going to look to reconfigure what this looks like and devolve the OSB, and that was the position. That was the position for everybody. And it's one of those things. I think we again, for those who don't know, a history lesson very, very briefly. The SAB came about, and the OSB came about from where there were a series of fan groups at the time that weren't able to work together, and that empowered the club, if you like, to be able to say, well, look, we'll build out the supporters board because you're not able to do it.
Yes,
and for whatever the views on that, and I've got mine, I'm sure you've got yours. I'm
well, it seems quite arrogant and patronising.
Well, and again,
My words.
I try and maintain the middle ground, but I think anybody would find it quite difficult to find you wrong there, mate. They really would, But I think what's without doubt is when you've got 8,500 unhappy bunnies pounding the pavement through East London, which I know we all love, and it's all very scenic, but I'm sure we've all got better things to do than walk up and down the Greenway on a Saturday mornings, mate. I think you have to recognise and realise that the support base, the fan base, has mobilised itself and has matured, and now is in the position to control the levels of engagement that it wants. And I think that across the board there are a number of really good different supporters who have got together in a variety of different entities covering various aspects, whether that's for our older fans or on diversity and all different kinds of aspects in the game. And there has been, and it's very, very easy for me, to pick holes. So much material, but there's also some really good work that's been carried out by some of those subgroups here and there and what they've done. There's been some that I scratch my head as if to why would you put your time into that? No one cares. Price of a pie, let's change a pie flavour, really, But and then I suppose there's other things that have been done that I think there must be some good people in and across this kind of these committees that are set up to be able to achieve some of the stuff that's been achieved.
Give me a good one, Steve. In the interest of balance, give me a good thing that's been done by a committee and a good decision where you thought, okay, that was good, that helped.
So I think a lot of the work, I'll pick one out. I think a lot of the stuff that's been done in and around diversity has been good. I think particularly if we look at the work that the club does with Pride of Irons and that kind of thing, I think that's to be commended. I really do. In the modern game, there's lots of challenges. I think that's to be commended. I think there's been some good work there. I think there's been other work that's been carried out as well, whereby they've looked to do stuff with older fans. They've done visits. They've tried to engage with younger people in the community. But this drives me on to one of my biggest challenges. And I had a conversation about this last week with none other than Tara Warren, actually, about communication. At the club, and I do feel sometimes, and it's been, we're forever blowing bubbles, and it's been suggested to me a few times that perhaps some of the leadership team at West Ham are in a bubble, and they are somewhat detached, once or twice removed from the feeling of the fans and the fan base, because however they choose to communicate their messaging out from the club certainly doesn't filter through to our fans or to our membership. Our membership are often fuming about the decisions that the club make, which seem to be completely detached from the feeling that they've got. And I think if we look at the recent survey that came out that said 75% of people were dissatisfied with the current setup and the move, and they feel the move has not been a success, and there's loads of room for improvement on a series of scales. And yet the club would say that, it's been successful, everything's great, things are going the right direction, we're doing great work. So there's a real disconnect there, and that's communication, and that's something that needs to be improved hugely. And to that end, mate, I think going back to that point about how we do that, I think that has to be by way of a supporters, an independent supporters board that's put together by the fans for the fans. It's done by ourselves, and it's done with reference to the Football Supporters Association working with the supporters to create something that is not accountable to the club. As a supporters board, you shouldn't be accountable to the club. You want dialogue with it. You want people to present themselves to provide the conduit that you need to be able to have communication with the club and feed some of that back. And you know, one of the things that I find incredibly frustrating, you know, and given some of my own some of my own commercial endeavours, I think any other business, you know, if you look at any fortune company, any FTSE 500 company, you know, if they're what they call CSAT scores, their customer satisfaction scores, if their CSAT scores went down from like the 99s to 97s or 97s to 95s, people on the C-suite would be sacked, Gonzo. You know, they'd be sacked. They wouldn't touch the ground. They'd be out. Like, this is catastrophic. 5% of our customers are not happy. There's been a massive drop. They're gone. We currently have 75% of our fans, according to an independent survey that touched about 4,500 people. So quite a sensible survey, you know, saying that they're not happy. You know, and yet what do? We go, our club go and communicate badly again, and that perhaps leads us on to, you know, some of the current subjects, you know, in and around what I can only say really are debacles really in and around, you know, season ticketing and getting back to football and, you know,
Well, that's what I want to discuss. That's really what I want to discuss. I mean, you speak about it from a corporate perspective. I mean, just 75% dissatisfaction. Of course, it means 25% satisfaction. Let's be fair. If you were going to look for a restaurant on TripAdvisor and you saw it at 2.5 out of 10, you wouldn't be going and eating a meal there, would you? Let's be perfectly frank. That's very, very low score indeed. So we're getting on to engagement with yourselves now. And I want to fast forward a little bit because I want this video to be digestible for everybody. You got invited in, and as I understand it, amongst others, so WISA, who are the second biggest supporters groups, and amongst others, you got invited onto a Skype or Zoom call, whatever it might have been, with some of the head people at the club to give over your advice on how the club should proceed with season ticketing. Have I got that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. So I think if we roll back, the government produced legislation which they call going from their stage 4 to stage 5 without getting into all the detail. But they released a 21-page document, you know, and that talks all in and around the guidelines for taking football fans back into stadia moving forward. As such, you know, we were delighted, in fact, you know, given their historic challenges with getting dialogue with the board, to be invited to a call to look to discuss how that could work and what our views were. You know,
can you tell me can you tell us your views? Sorry, I know I'm trying to press you on this, but can you tell me what you suggested the club should do as a return to football and around season ticketing, mate?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. And there's no, you know, there's no confidentiality in and around that. We're very public in what we've suggested should have been happened, and we shared that with the club. So this isn't a confidentiality thing, Gonzo. There's no problem at all asking. Our suggestions and our views very much were firstly and foremostly that given the current climate and a number of fans who will, through what is still very, very limited information in and around COVID-19, we're still learning all the time. Any of our fans who feel that they don't want to renew their season tickets or re-attend games for the season 2021 should be given the option not to renew their season ticket, but have no penalty and their season ticket held until the following season 21-22. That's our position. That's our firm position, and that's actually the position of the FSA as well. The FSA have got published guidelines. It's the Football Supporters Association, published guidelines saying if supporters don't want to go, they shouldn't have to take any financial impact for not attending next season, given where it is. The second thing for us that I think was very, very important is to ensure that any of our fans, and you know, if we live in very interesting times. But I think everybody recognises that over the next year in particular, we're going to have some really, really difficult financial circumstances. You know, we're predicting unemployment rates going up by 1.5 million across the country. We're looking at our output as a nation is going to be really, really impacted, Gonzo. Going to be a challenge. And as such, a number of our fans, all football fans, but our fans, will feel the pinch. They'll feel the squeeze. Our fans are going to lose their jobs. Our fans are going to be financially squeezed. And many already have been after being furloughed for a period of time. And I think it's really important. I feel that the club has an obligation and a social responsibility to ensure that those supporters are in a position whereby they have they don't feel pressured to look to find money at a particularly difficult time to renew a ticket and not go. So I think provision needs to be put in place for those supporters through this time. And the third one, I think, is for our older supporters. You know, many of our oldest time-served fans who haven't missed games for decades, at this particular time are placed into higher risk groups and the like. I think they need to understand that if they were looking to get back to football, particular areas could be created for them that are safe, COVID safe, and a plan's put in place to ensure they're treated with kid gloves. So that's kind of our position, mate, and we're public on that, and that's where it is, and that's what we would have liked to have seen.
But you articulated that to the club. Those 3 points you just made, you said that to the club in this Zoom meeting,
Yeah,
whatever
no,
it is.
absolutely.
Okay.
I don't think that I don't think the people from the club that were on that call would have any issue with me sharing that, mate. No, yeah, I did, absolutely.
Were the FSA, the Football Supporters Association, who are that's the one you want to be affiliated. You have to be affiliated with that, don't you? Really, to have to be classed as independent. Were the FSA privy to this conversation? Did they know the point?
And again, I can't go into the detail of the call, but
Yes.
the FSA were in attendance on that call, Gonzo.
Okay, so the FSA were in the call.
Yeah.
And you were basically
at the invitation of the club, and it's fair to say, and I think I've gone to print about this. I think it's very fair to say that the FSA have really tried to work. They've worked very, very hard, particularly of late, to try and get this engagement going again. They're obviously in a position where they're the supporters. They're a supporters association. They've got some engagement with the club. They're trying to keep the club whole. They're looking to try and work with us. So they've done very, very well to get everyone around the table, and obviously they give some really, really good guidance and guideline too.
Well, okay, that's really important. I'm not looking to lead you here particularly, but there is something that is immediately in my mind that I do want to get to. Now, and what I think is probably worth pointing out that because of the current COVID restrictions and whatnot, this probably was a Skype or a Zoom call or a conference call.
No, it was a Zoom call.
But I think it's fair to say it was of such high importance with all the supporters groups being there, with the FSA being there, and with the club being involved. Now, I've been in meetings with the club before. I think it's fair to assume that had we not been under the current restrictions, this would have been a meeting that was held in the club. I think that is a fair assumption. With that in mind, they heard all of these. At what point after that meeting did the club announce the 2-stage plan for the season tickets that they did, which seemed like an absolute disaster? How long afterwards?
Yeah, so I suppose that's again that was a frustration, and I can't. It was disappointing. It was disappointing because we believed from the conversations that we had, and I'm a reasonably articulate chap, Gons. And I did ask if the decisions were finite and if the wheels were already in motion, or if the suggestions that us and many other people that were in attendance had made that day would be taken on board. And we were told they would be. And then I think what's probably best. It's nothing new, right? It's another communications error at the club, and I engaged with stakeholders at the club afterwards, and they were like, we thought we covered that when we made the initial statement, and I'm like, look, our fan base, God love them, are not looking to explore the caveats made in statements on our website, they just want clear communication, mate. They want people to go, right, that's what it is. That's when it is. That's what it's going to cost you. These are the reasons why, and to not be able to have that and to go, well, it's a work in progress, and it is a work in progress. And I do try and be fair to the club, and obviously the operators of the stadium, who, remember, we are tenants here, so we'll be working in line with the operators of the stadium, who will have to create that environment, and then the club as the tenant will have to make sure that works, and all the other parties involved. And as I said, the document's 21 pages, 15 solid pages of guideline in that document. And it's not an easy task, right? It's very easy for me to sit here and, go, oh, I'll bash the club, but there's plenty of other material for me to work with, frankly, mate. I don't need to do that. But the point being, they had a golden opportunity to look to take that and come out with something polished. And instead, I think half-cocked is probably the best expression, almost, within days. We had the meeting, I think, on the Thursday. I think the announcement was made within days later. I think it was on the Monday, actually, the following Monday. The announcement came out, and it was like, well, this is what we're going to charge, and this is the ticket, and the provisions that we're really hopeful will be put into play. they just weren't there. And then all of a sudden you're in, and then the club, obviously, we're furious. My members are furious. You know, like our membership all of a sudden lights up. Social media lights up. You would have seen
Of course.
posts from the club, went on Twitter, were pulled off Twitter. Social media is alive with discontent. Our members are flooding us, you know, in around what they want to do. And I'm like, and I used the statement at the time on the previous week, as I went into the end of that week, I was looking to work with the club to take circa a third of our base, 22,000 people back into the stadium, right? You know, and despite what we feel about the stadium, 22,000 people back in the stadium to support the team. And then I'm looking at going into the back end of the following week, looking at probably taking 22,000 people to the gates in protest. You know, that's miles apart from where you want to be. Everybody's got to do a lot better in and around communicating that kind of stuff to our supporters. You know, because it's just not on, is it?
Well, I look at it in the most basic of forms. There's something that I want to touch at with the stadium and this report, which is less boring than it sounds. But I am just gobsmacked when I listen to that story. Just the one thing that pops into my mind is that somebody in the entity of the club have asked for a meeting, have asked for a think tank, have asked to get minds together to discuss how they can go forward, to get some ideas on how they can get fans back into the stadium and how they can launch the season ticketing. Yet, having sat around, having listened to those opinions, they then discard them and go and do something different, and then find themselves backtracking. And you mentioned about the fallout on social media and everywhere else. That fallout, you've got to remember, is without the knowledge of what you've just said. Everyone's just angry at the season ticket. They don't know then that you've actually had a meeting with them, that you've suggested an alternative, and the club looks at it, no, we'll do the other thing instead. Thanks for however long you were on the call. And I understand what you're saying, just to mitigate that they turn around and said, oh, well, hold on, there was an extra one. But maybe it was in the small print, and but that's not good enough. As you say, you've
Yeah.
got to be big and bold, and you've got to really get your point across quickly. I've got to do it in this video. I'll have to get my point across quickly when I put the title in this video, and you've got to do that with people. And I think that's really shoddy. It's really clumsy. You're right. It's another communications error, and they are so bad at it. And I just think after you repeatedly get things wrong, the same thing wrong, by the way, because it is all communication. Why? It's no good to just keep sitting there and say, "Oh no, we got it wrong again." Oh, why don't you then go and implement something to change that? As I actually think getting people round and discussing it is the right way to implement and change. If you don't do that and then think, no, do you know what? Actually, it's my way or the
Well,
highway. It reminds me of an old Brian Clough quote,
it
actually.
does, it does actually. Yeah, very, 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 very. What would you call that? Cloughian? Yeah, very much so. And I think what particularly is frustrating is, as you can imagine, right? Trust is really thin on the ground. You know, really thin on the ground. And I have to, you know, I have to. I've had challenges working with the club in my role at Hammers United for a period of time. You know, I've not always seen eye to eye with, you know, with Jake, our SLO. I really haven't. Although I'll commend him on the work that he did when he was actually off on holiday after the news broke out. He was away with his wife and his kids. You know, and you know, he really put a shift in to try and bridge the gap. But where it becomes really difficult for us as a, you know, as a supporters group who ultimately is accountable to its members, is when its members then start suggesting, you go, well, look, they've teed you up, you know, because if you're cynical, and I'm quite a cynical guy by nature, right? If you're cynical, they're like, they've pulled you all in. That's what they were going to do all along. They weren't interested, you know, and you know, you've just gone along and you've given what they've done credibility, you know. And I'm like, well, that's where the thick line in the sand's drawn actually for us, because I can't then say, you know, well, yeah, that's the work that we've done, and we're really pleased and really really proud about that, because as you heard from the statements we've made, it simply wasn't, you know. And as much as we do not, you know, we're a supporters group, we'll take what the fans ask for. I don't expect the club to agree for everything that I'll ever go and suggest to them, Gonzo, over the course of the period of time. Of course I don't. I'm a realist. You know, there are things that they have to do, decisions they've got to make. But you would like to think on the very first opportunity that we get to sit round a table and we look to share some of the sentiments, some of the feeling, what we felt were good ideas that were in line with national guidelines, really, you know, issued by the FSA. you're frustrated, mate. You're really frustrated because then you're talking to your members and you're saying, well, look, we're trying to work with them. And when I'm asked by, actually non-West Ham fans quite often, when they ask me, they go, look, would it ever change? Because they just don't seem to understand, do they? They don't seem to care. And people ask me, like, what must it be like for them to work in an environment day in, day out, where we're such a large cross section of your supporters, your fans, your customers, that just hate you.
It must be horrible to be the person on the end of the telephone line who you are just doing a job. You're possibly getting minimum wage as well, and your job is to pick up the telephone and say, "Hello, West Ham United." It's rah! And Sullivan sat back in his director's box all on his own now with his mask scarf hanging off. Hey, watching a game, stadium to myself. Lovely jubbly.
Well, that beggars the question. As we alluded to, it's you could certainly say that it was an easy ride into the end of the season after. And I have to say this, I know this is not what we're talking about, but after what was, by any streak of the imagination, another dismal campaign, given to where we've come from, where we were, what we were promised, what we were looking to achieve, and where we ended up and how we've ended up. Another dismal campaign. Credit to the lads for turning it out, and I suppose credit to David Moyes for getting them fit enough to turn them around to finish the season strongly at the back end. But as a season in a whole, and you've got to look at the whole season, not just polish off the last few games. Dreadful, absolutely dreadful, and miles away from where we should be, and what was promised to us, what we agreed to take the move on, all of that jazz, Gonzo. Has been well talked through beforehand. Just not good enough in my mind. Abject failure of the season.
No, and you don't believe me. It's not going off tangent on this channel to talk about David Moyes' team and the season. You're absolutely fine. You're just a West Ham fan like the rest of us, mate. There is one other thing that again occurred to me whilst you were talking. So, to paraphrase, the government produced a 21-page report, or whatever, something like that, which was really a direction and an instruction and a guide to get fans back into playing. Well, it wasn't just football, was it? It's to get fans back into events, let's say. There's certain hoops that have got to be jumped through, T's that have got to be crossed. There's certain things that the government want, stadia and clubs and theatres and things like that. They want those to do in order to make it safe for the clientele to return.
Yeah, COVID secure being the government term.
COVID secure, fantastic. So there's going to be a lot of stuff. So, for instance, my local shop now, they've got an extra expense there. So if you want to go into my local shop, they've got some hand gel at the front, and they've basically clearly had to incur some additional costs, whereas before you used to walk in there and buy your stuff. At least they're having to buy this hand gel and stuff. Basically it's extra hassle and extra costs. I can only really extrapolate from that the costs for doing a stadium and making a stadium safe are going to be vast, are going to be significant. As you pointed out at the start, it's not our stadium. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's fair for me to say, be it we want to talk about Baroness Brady and Sadiq Khan being the very obvious example, but I think it's fair to say, bearing in mind the legal history between the two, the stadium and the club don't get on, or haven't historically. I think there's a hiatus at the moment, maybe a period of calm, but there's been legal disputes. They've taken each other to court, I think, or one or the other. I think it's fair to say, to dispute things legally. With that in mind, and bearing in mind there was haggles over who should pay for the carpet, things that are quite small, it does concern me that there's a massive burden of cost to get us back to football. And historically, it looks like we may well say it's almost... It's like we might get the invoice, look at it, think, oh, there you go, that's yours to pay, and pass it on to the stadium. What are your thoughts on that? And does that put us in a perilous position, I'm wondering? Is it going to be a case of, bearing in mind everyone's skint, right? You say about individuals being skint. I'm quite sure the coffers for London, in terms of what the mayor's got to spend, I'm quite sure he's skint. I'm quite sure the government is skint. You're skint. I'm quite sure lots of people are skint. Basically, if they have to pay out a load more money to make the arena COVID safe, they're already being bankrolled and being subsidised basically out of the Greater London Kitty, they're already being subsidised to the tune of between 20-30 million a year. I'm talking about the stadium here, because those are the sort of losses it makes. How much appetite is there going to be for them to do that? At what point somebody turn around and say, no, we just can't pay that sort of stuff? Because let's be fair, if you're struggling for whatever, police or ambulances or whatever the case may be, to get transport up and running, to do Crossrail or whatever, are you really going to think, oh, no, that stadium don't need more money, does it? What are your opinions on that?
It's a really interesting one, mate. So we're aligned. You know, it's one of the things that I'm concerned about, and it's actually something that I raised, and I can't go into the detail, but it's something that I raised because for me, when you and I, before we went on to that meeting, I examined those guidelines. I went through them a few times with a tooth comb. You know, and it's actually, if anyone's as boring and sad as me, you know, when you flick through the document in the second paragraph, there's a piece in and around it that says that fans are not allowed to interact, you know, or attendees are not allowed to interact with any other groups before or after the event. Now, loosely interpreted, or actually tightly interpreted, what that means is you're looking to take circa 22,000 people into Stratford to watch football, but those groups are not allowed to interact with each other before the game or after the game. And for me, just that second paragraph, before I churn through everything else, I really struggled to see how that will be achieved without masses of work. Right, like as many of the guys know, I'm involved with grassroots football. Right, I coach badly. No, I'm a great coach. I coach under 14.
He's the best. He's the best.
I coach under 14s. I'm blessed. I've got two other guys with me who actually know what they're doing, so it's really a good mix. You know, but the impact for us, you know, some of the guys on our committee locally for the team that I'm involved with, you know, a few people there took off a few days, mate. They took 3 or 4 days and they put in place risk assessments and a load of documentation to make sure we've got about 40 teams out, right? So for 40 teams, which is about 400 odd kids, it took days and there was an impact to us as a grassroots football club, a local community football club, right? Now, when you look to ramp that up to the scale of West Ham, the impact, the cost, where that's going to sit with the Olympic Stadium. And, you know, I like you know, it's been very well documented, the long-standing relationship. I think the commonly used term these days is frenemies, right? You know, so you know,
I haven't heard that one.
You know, I think not be more fitting than for perhaps the, you know.
I thought you were going to go with fractures when I heard the start, the first syllable. I always going with fractures here. Oh, frenemies. Okay, nice.
Frenemies, right? Best of frenemies. So, you know, I look at that and I think without a doubt there's going to be a cost. And obviously one of the massive bugbears of our members over a period of time was stewarding, you know, looking to go inside the ground with away fans in the ground, all sorts of stuff. I can only think that there will have to be an increase in stewarding to look to manage and make this happen. The guidelines in place, how it's going to operate internally, signage, you know, additional hygiene, how that's going to look. How are you going to look to provide food in that kind of environment or drink in that kind of environment? You know, massive. So the amount of work that that's going to entail, I'd suggest it'd be sizable. I think it's going to have a substantial cost. And somebody's going to have to foot that bill. And I've actually inquired on behalf of our members, and I'm not holding anybody accountable here, but I'm waiting on response back from the club, you know, which they've assured me we'll get, because to be fair to them, they've still got to meet with their best frenemy. I quite like that now.
I'll use it.
So they've got to have a meeting and work some of that stuff through. And it's interesting actually because I've met with obviously with the historic marches and demonstrations. I've met beforehand with the safety advisory from Newham. I've met with some of the representatives for the stadium who are actually, you know, good people with, you know, with some really sensible ideas and approaches and how they keep it safe and how they look to deliver. And what was actually highlighted in previous conversations with the FSA is that normally you would have a fan representative in and around those types of conversations, you know, and you know we'd actually welcome to be involved in those kind of conversations because we do believe that we're very in touch with our supporters and we can kind of give that kind of perspective that perhaps if we look at our communications history is often overlooked or not touched on by our friends at the club.
Mate, that's sterling stuff. I've got two further questions, and one of them is far more important than the other, and one that the subscribers on this channel will be desperate to know to clear something up. A barbecue sauce or tomato sauce on a pizza?
For me, mate, it's got to be tomato, I'm afraid.
Wow, you're a wise man. You're a wise man. That's clear.
Barbecue on the chicken, tomato on the pizza, mate.
It's absolutely clear. I'm glad we've cleared that up. It's a little bit of an issue over here. We discuss it more often than we should. The final question is, well, it's not the final question. What is it for Hammers United going forward? As your final few words on it, what do you want? What do you want to achieve? What do you hope to achieve? What's the plan?
You know what, mate? That's a great question, and I suppose I'll without looking to jump on my soapbox, because I'll probably be here forever talking about it. What I believe our members and our fan base desperately want is to be reconnected with our football club. There's a massive disconnect there at the moment. People that have been going to football for generations are throwing it in. You know, people are thinking, I feel disconnected. I'm going for the sake of it. The match day experience isn't where it needs to be. West Ham as an experience, you know, and everybody's always gone for the football. Blimey, we're certainly not glory hunters, Gonzo. You know, no one's ever going to point that gun at us, right?
No.
We're about the camaraderie. We're about the support. We're about the interaction and engagement with our fan base, with our supporters. And something for a period of time has been dying in and around that experience. And that hurts me as a West Ham fan. I feel I and my fellow committee members have got a great privilege to be able to serve our fellow fans. And that's a bleed, you know, in a medical term, it's a bleed. And I look at where we are, and it's almost as though for a period of time now we've been bleeding out. And I do believe, and without, as you know, I'm far from an arrogant man. I kind of feel that Hammers United is coming on at the right time, and we've stopped that bleed, and we've been able to turn around and galvanise the West Ham support and say to the club, no more, you know, no more. We will not take this anymore. We've put 8,500 people on the Greenway. You're absolutely right. We're already in communication talking about what we'd look to do for the last day of the season. And we were looking at 12,000 people, actually. That's what we were gauging. And that's where we were looking to take things. We have a golden opportunity now for those at the club to pick up the olive branch that was offered when we first started and start real engagement with us. We've got a golden opportunity to create an independent supporters board and start driving the messaging of what fan experience for us is and what we want. As a group, you know, we believe that after the period of time that our ownership has been in charge, you know, I think it's time to have a look and think, this needs to change. At leadership level, it needs to change. You know, the promises made have been under-delivered against. Nobody in their right mind could say that as a club, post-transition, since the change in ownership initially, and then post-transition to the Olympic Stadium, you know, we are successful, because we're not. And you cannot continue doing what you've always done if you're getting unsuccessful results. Something's got to change. So for me, I want change. I'm a bastion of change. I want to see things change. I look back, mate, after that demonstration, and I've got this glaring memory of this young 3 or 4 year old lad on his dad's shoulders, blonde lad, bright blue eyes, walking along in the crowd. You know, what's his future like as a fan for West Ham? What kind of club is he going to be left? And that's the responsibility of all of us as supporters, to make sure that the board and those at the club understand that it's not good enough, it's not acceptable. We want change, and we want it now. And as we go towards a new season, you know, I want to be in a position where people are coming up and going, do you know what? We recognise that it's not been good enough. We recognise. I don't want to hear any more of this, how great we are, look at what we've done, look at what we've achieved. 75% of your fans are not happy. 8,500 of them are walking through East London on a Saturday morning telling you they're not happy. You know, if you don't want to be part of the change, if you don't want to improve it, don't be here. Just don't be here. You know, let's change it. That's what I'm saying, mate. Let's change it.
That's a nice one. I like let's change it. That's a good one. That's a good old slogan, that one. Listen, mate, where can we find your website, everything like that? Where can we, if people want to engage?
Well, I was going to say, normally you'd find us on bridges or in pubs or in and around on match day, but you know that doesn't look like it's going to be happening anytime soon. But in the meantime, you know, we're on social media. hammersunited.com is the website. Hammers United on Facebook. Hammers United on Twitter. You know, feel free. Any comments, any questions, any engagement, any issues. We are inundated at the moment with people talking about everything from being unhappy from where their seats have been moved in the new configuration to concerns that they've got about being able to afford their season ticket, what it's going to be. Feel free to write to us directly. We're more than happy to pick those up and take them on board and drive engagement with the club on those points.
That's great. I mean, I think that's so important. If you've got a problem, join up. Write down your problems, engage with you, and you will take those issues to the club.
It's the only way we'll ever change it, mate. And I say that to each and every West Ham fan out there, you know. Don't be dissatisfied, you know, stuck at home. Don't be dissatisfied. Whatever you're doing day to day with things are at the club, you have got it in your gift to give to change, you know. Hammers United is a free organisation. We don't ask for any membership. We don't ask anything from anybody, you know. But if you want to drive change, become a member. Get your friends, your families to become members, you know, and United, Hammers United, we will drive change at this football club.
Well, listen, well done, mate. I think a couple of things. I think the way you behave is really, really good. I think the way it was impressive, actually. Too much. I look at everything and I don't see that common decency and doing the right thing supersedes whatever the agenda is. I think you struck that chord lovely. I think you got to a point. You said, actually, no, you did the right thing. You were decent. You said, no, public safety is more important now. You just fell on the right side of it. I think it was the right thing to do. And you basically said, public safety, our members, our supporters are just doing the right thing for the country, for the public, for the NHS. All those things supersedes our agenda with West Ham United's board at this point. Is absolutely the right thing to do. I think also I love the way that you sort of looked at. I don't see anything nasty. I don't see you criticising Wisser or any of that other stuff, which does turn people off, because I've seen it before with other things. I think it was too fragmented. I thought for a far too long, what has been a turn off for me, that it was almost like the old Judean People's Front. There were too many. It was seriously, there were too many different versions of supporters groups, and I think again people switch off because it gets confusing. I think the way you brought so many together, but also looked to aggregate everybody else as well and bring them on board. You've led. I think you've just led really well, and just a whole lot of you, Paul, yourself, Andy, everybody else. I think you've done an absolutely marvelous job. If anybody wants to find out more, I will put the links in the video under the screen right here where we are. Mate, thanks for joining us, and we'll
thank you very much, mate. Always a pleasure to come on. Thank you very much for giving us the platform, Gonzo. I really, really do appreciate it. And you know, as we said, let's drive change. You know, let's drive change together.
Tross from Hammers United.
Thanks very much, guys. Cheers.